Hello, everyone. Welcome to this 31 lecture in the Going Public Lecture series of the Faculty of Architecture of the KU Leuven. Super excited for tonight. We will get tools for debate, and that is what we are looking for. Going Public program is about debate. It's about debating architecture, discussing architecture, being part of the discourse and being active in that as a faculty. Tonight's lecture is part of the craftsmanship engagement that is curated by Thomas Ooms, who you see here, part of the screen. Tonight's lecture is by Jan Boelen, and he will be introduced by Bekemans. I won't say much more, but just give the floor to Laurens.
Hello, everybody. So I'm very happy and honored even to present you all Jan Boelen. So I invited Jan for this lecture, and Jan is most probably many of you may know already as curator of design, architecture, and contemporary art. He's currently rector at the Karlsruhe University of Art and Design, and also artistic director at Atelier Luma, which is an experimental laboratory for design in Arles in the south of France, in the Camargue. And it's also the place where me and Jan met again a few years ago on a project that we're doing together with Assemble, together with Jan, together with Atelier Luma, which is a very exciting project. And it made me, I think maybe Jan will mention a bit this kind of project in his lecture. But I think I met Jan, if he remembers even, many years before at Z33, and when he was still artistic director of Z33. And he also in that position developed together with the whole team around Francesca also the whole enlargement of the Z33 exhibition halls and spaces. And I think also in relation to this project, which he led, and also the project with whom we're collaborating together, it was clear for me how Jan looked at architecture as well. From this point of view of prototyping, from the point of view of building not only as a building, but also building as research, building as prototyping, as social design, and this link and understanding of how to build with prototyping or building as prototypes. I think therefore the link to craftsmanship was very relevant. So I'm very happy for him to be here today and share a bit his views on design, on architecture and art. So therefore, I let Jan speak out and share his views to all of us. Thank you very much, Jan, for to accept the invitation.
Yeah. Thank you, Laurens. Thank you, Thomas, and thank you, Lilet, for the invitation. Yeah, I'm in fact honored to give this lecture. I'm really interested. When the invitation came in, I was very fast, very enthusiastic about it because I could bring another layer in the narrative that I most of the time bring. And I thought, yeah, it's a good moment also, these lectures, to reflect about what you do yourself. And I want to talk today about the role of prototypes as tools for debate. I don't only see objects or architecture, but also exhibitions and installations and interventions as tools for debate. My question is then, what are we debating? What are we talking about? And why should we talk about it? And what does it contribute to the design, the proposal that we are putting on the table? And that will be a kind of red thread throughout my lecture. I go and go through my ideas that I want to share with you and want to check also with you. You could on one hand say that many prototypes are very pragmatic solutions from technical details that we need to understand how that maybe a building or an object is constructed. Sometimes a prototype is used to create a kind of debate, a political, a critical debate, to show how things can be different. Many renders are used like that in order to show what is possible. Another possibility is using a prototype to develop speculations. If we would do this, then that would happen, and suddenly you have scenarios and narratives. And then, of course, a prototype can show how that the relations between people and objects can change, and also how it functions as a conversation piece. So it's a kind of form of social design. I have to push here. I started indeed approximately 18 years ago in Z33 in Hasselt, which is called a House for Contemporary Art. And there I worked till last year when the building opened. Unfortunately, never the building opened properly, but the building was there and was the result of a process of approximately 11 years. 11 years where one person was always there in one way or another in the different competitions, feasibility studies, and so on. And then final as the chosen architect, Francesca Torso. Here you see the site of Z33. It's a former beguinage. And then here, this is the building, and I hope you see my cursor, of 58, a remarkable museum building of 1958. And here is the new building of Francesca Torso next to the Geneva Museum in Hasselt. And this is an open space with a ruin of a church. Every architect that was part of the competition had to make a model that fitted into this model we gave them. And as a tool to understand how different proposals would work. This is a proposal of Francesca Torso, and it's was part of what she made as for two, let's say, with what she won the competition with. And here you see, in fact, the main idea of the building itself. The main idea of the building is, and this is a ceramic prototype. Every space is made by ceramic, and still parts are recognizable. This is still in, this is out and became this part. And what is it? It is a collection of spaces. And with this collection of objects, we played together to understand how the spaces would relate to each other and how vulnerable they are, but also very strong. So the materiality of the prototype was also very important for her. It is in the making of this prototype and of the many prototypes she made that the architecture is made in itself. This is something that I learned from Francesca. And at a certain time, we also had to start making renders now, but Francesca and renders and 3D is not something that really functions. And we had to share and even dare to come up with alternative strategies to convince the city that the building that we were proposing was completely closed to the street side. And I don't know if some of you went there already. And there's a big wall of more than 30 meters long and 12 meters high, and only have two small openings in it, but is fully transparent. How do you convince a city that is asking and demanding transparency in its public buildings. And what we did, or what Francesca did, is build this model in her studio. It's a very large model. This is a traditional table. So this is this is the entrance. It's a part of the building. It's a cutout where we showed how transparent the building was. We built it, and she built it almost like tile by tile, on scale. And here you see a picture that is then made with this model in order to show how transparent and how open and light the building was. There was also another very interesting model that I cannot show because I don't have any picture of it, but it's here. And that model was in fact a paper model. A paper model, a bit done like with slices that you can put into each other, and that just could go into the suitcase. But the bigger model was used to put on a theater stage in Genova, and there with theater light and photographers photographed in such a way so that we would already have a set of renders. And last week, I was talking with Joe from Assemble, and he said, yeah, but the building is already longer open, because now I see the pictures, and the pictures I already see for a couple of years. And that's exactly what happened. We literally reenacted the building with the prototype as if it was there. So the prototype, almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy of something that has to come. And we had to do that in a very confident way, because many times the province wanted to stop the building process. So we really convinced everybody with the models that were made and to convince them and make them partner in crime in the process itself. And by doing these models, Francesca Torso made architecture. She didn't design the building, she made it literally, and understood the materiality and built it with that. I'm not going into all the details, but working in Z33 also created a way of thinking how that art, architecture, and design can be used as a strategy. And beauty or poetry, you can use it, really can evoke doubt. And with that doubt, helps us to think what kind of buildings, what kind of environments we really need. We don't need more of the same. And it was Francesca Torso in the competition that convinced us by showing something completely different with different qualities, rather than more white cube spaces that we already had in that museum building up 58. And she was understanding that this mission that I show you here was something to embrace, and clarity and reduction would not help. So Z33, I often say, operates as an awareness machine. And I'm going to show you 2 or 3 examples of an exhibition that I find relevant for this group of practitioners. It's an exhibition that is curated by Evelien Brakke, and she's now curator at the Design Museum in Ghent. And it's an exhibition where we showed kind of where the designers, architects, and artists really could use the building as they wanted. They could literally choose the place where they wanted to put the object. This is a work of Makking en Bay, Studio Makking en Bay of the Netherlands. And they found a loophole in the law, in the Dutch law, that for a couple of square meters, if you build something in the Netherlands, you can freely connect it to the architecture. And here they made a kind of almost prophetic design an office on the roof of a home. And this office, or this prototype, which was partially digitalized wood with this kind of Velux reference roof window, was exhibited on the stairs of Z33 as if it was a roof to watch to the garden, to the environment in itself. A tool for debate, because it's criticizing the laws and the loopholes in itself. Another project that I want to show from the same exhibition was done by a designer, Italian designer, Daniela Dossi, and it's called Cortegraen. If you know a little bit Flemish, then you would know that Corten is what we have in the Flemish gardens. And she brought together in these typical enclosed spaces, and she found there empty spaces, and she said, if I would build now a common infrastructure for all the people of the neighborhood, how would that look like? So she took in Hasselt, in that city where Z33 is situated, a kind of developed together with the citizens a kind of program for a Cortegraen in their backyard that they would share. Here you see a bit the entrance. I don't go into detail of all the projects that would lead us tonight too far, but also using and involving publics in seeing how a garden could function with an intervention they made themselves. Probably some of you also know this. This is a project that we commissioned to Gijs van Warenberg, Reading Between Lines. And it's in Haspengouw, which is a very touristic, beautiful area. When we were invited to curate their project in public space, I didn't want to do it because the project itself or the landscape is so beautiful. So why do you have to add another sculpture? Why is that needed? Why do we need that monument? But then I understood that underlying this beautiful landscape, there are many problems. And one of the problems and frictions that are there are the religious heritage. The religious heritage, like Borgloon, the small village where this sculpture is standing, is having 13 churches for 15,000 people. So the boredom of having this heritage that is emotional and socially super important and needed to be discussed. Reading between the lines is literally a comment or a possibility to discuss cultural heritage. Here we brought not only the people of Borgloon together, but also the heritage people, the Flemish community, in order to show how that this heritage is disappearing and maybe also appearing when in new ways, in new forms, and that you can construct possible futures there. So this is how we first impermanent work for 1 year, and then again another year, and then it became part of the collective memory of this village, how this is now there and is part of a kind of dealing with the heritage and the discussion on the heritage itself. I'm not going to show all the projects. All of these interventions in the landscape question problems that are out there and can be seen as prototypes to rethink, for instance, tourism, heritage, or rethink private models and privatization and citizenship in a city as Hasselt here by the artist Felice Verini. I don't go into detail of this project. I'm happy to elaborate on it later on, but you could only see it from one viewpoint in a city that is hyper commercialized and where the owners are big companies and they don't allow anything on their walls because they want to have certainties and then have issues with promotion and so on, and nobody is living above. So what I want to show, and I see there is something in the middle that should not be there, that these prototypes that I show are, of course, sometimes objects, sometimes they are just like, can be products, can be solutions, but they also show and can be showing systems and networks, scenarios, and function, as I said before, conversation pieces. If I go further from Z33 to Design Academy Eindhoven, where I was till last year in August, head of Master of Social Design. Also there we produced many prototypes. As this gun, I'm not going to elaborate on this, but this is an interesting prototype, a prototype that is commenting Mark Rutten that 3 years ago in another election said to immigrants that they should do normal. And do normal, he said, is give like Dutch people handshakes. And of course, today we all know what a handshake means, but he said on top of that, and he made like advertisements in that in the Dutch newspapers that they should learn it. And Mark Henning, a South African at that moment student of social design, took these words and said, okay, what is normal and what is normality? If handshake is normal, you also know that a handshake can be designed. And he made this table with how people can relate to each other in an immigration office, install a tool, a prototype, a possibility to learn newcomers how to give a handshake. And that spring handshake was promoted very well by Trump, who shaked several people or not the hand or almost broke their arms. Another interesting prototype is the work of Gabrielle Ann Meyer, where she wanted to show how that objects are in fact shaping us. And these are not shoes, but they bring us in a certain position. They show us that objects and the clothes we are wearing are putting us in a certain position and gender us, if we want or not. When we are born, before we are born, and even before we are realized, there is already an M or an F on our passport, and that M or F defines and designs our reality. That's not a prototype, that is a given, and you have to take it or leave it. And she is questioning this designing of reality and also gender by her installations and the norms that are put on us and that are designed on us. Going a bit faster. I also going to talk a little bit about a biennial that I curated in 2014 for design and architecture in Ljubljana in Slovenia. And it's the oldest design biennial. It was there where West and East could meet, and we brought 11 teams together, local and international. And normally it was always still then a moment of competition, and I wanted to make a collaborative process, a laboratory for design, and where we would design everyday life. What we did is we started to work together with all these people and thinking and rethinking the resources that we have. Here you see a motor with a very specific motor that is produced in Slovenia. And rather than having this motor only for a motorbike, we start thinking how it could activate a chainsaw, a laundry machine, but also a motorboat, so that it can be many things at the same time. And this way of thinking about how that little motors, electric motor components, are also used in electric household equipment is elaborated on this. 90% of these motors are similar. It's only the gears and the programs before the motor that are closed and that are standardized, and they're not standardized, are made specific for the tool in itself. And if we make that open and we can change, for instance, a motor into rotation, to vibration, to turning around, then a mixer can become a van, and we can start to exchange objects with each other. So what is important is that these exercises, what did they learn from me, and how also prototypes played a very interesting role in that, is that when we started, we brought 11 teams together with 11 different people that had different backgrounds with not a clear outcome, and that all these uncertainties and ambiguities really gave us and created the conditions for very successful projects. The most uncertain, the most diverse groups that you had to use the tools of prototypes and all the means that we as designers have and architects have to communicate were in the end the most successful projects. This brought me to Atelier Luma, which Lawrence already mentioned, and where I'm situated right now, and where that functions as a kind of think tank, but a laboratory for the Luma Foundation, where we work in a bioregion in the Camargue, and we are thinking how can we rebuild that region through design and use design as a tool for transition. I will give you some examples. This is the site of Luma, the Luma Foundation. This is in Arles. It's a small city with a post-industrial site. And here Frank Gehry is building a 10-level tower with a big park around it of bus mats. And here currently Atelier Luma is situated, and this is the new site of Atelier Luma that is done by Assemble and BC Architects, and will be ready next year. And then we will be doubled in size in itself. I'm gonna go further because that here you see what we did in the beginning. We started to build. You will see this more. It's an open structure system that is developed by Thomas Lomé and Christiane Höckner and based in Belgium, and that we supported with Z33. And then one designer, Lucas Weekwert, started to work with it further as a kind of open Meccano system to build shelves, tables, benches, and to build the atelier further and to become it, to make it into a workspace in itself. We use prototypes to accelerate research. We use prototypes to build connections. And here you see something of the Algae Lab. These are 3D printed algae polymers that we colored and produced ourselves in the lab. And that was done by Studio Klarenbeek. You see Klarenbeek and Dross, a design studio that went into the Camargue, and they found algae. Not that that's so exceptional because they are there, but the people that live there don't see it anymore, and they see it even as a problem because the algae, as you see here on the water, are covering and killing the biodiversity, and you have to take them out. And our question was, what can we do with it? What can we make with it? And how can we create a new ecosystem around it? And you can make textiles with it, you can make plastics with it, and that's exactly what we are doing. And the prototypes you saw in the first slide that I showed you about this project are not produced, but they are used as a tool to engage with other people. And now from a project to it became a platform where many people and universities gather and researchers gather, and now it's an Algae Lab and an Algae Summit and an Algae Review. But it's all started with 3-4 cups that we 3D printed and were made by algae. And in fact, to be very open and honest, you cannot use these cups, you cannot drink out of them. But they accelerated the research and built a community around it. So there they functioned as a Trojan horse. Another project that I want to share with you is from Atelier Luma and Thomas Failly, which is a project that deals with sunflower. And this here, the crop of the sunflower in Arles, the city of Van Gogh, where he painted the sunflower, is the emblem, is the icon of the city itself. And they are harvested painfully enough only to press oil. And this part after pressing can be used for animal food. But the rest here, what you see, nothing much can be done with it. And so we started to think, and if you ever broke a sunflower stem, then you could imagine, then you know that there is a kind of white foam in it with some woody particles. And this can become a kind of acoustic board, or something else. And we speculated about that. And what I can say today, that our intuition as designers was quite good, and it will be applied not only in this tower of Frank Gehry, and it will also be applied in the new laboratory that is done by Assemble MBC architects. So as an acoustic material that is on top of that also naturally fire resistant and has all the, and we have now all the certificates for doing that. Prototyping, showing what we can do with stones. I'm not going into these details, but I just show you the variety of the research that was done. And then Lilet was asked it in beforehand. We had a little short talk. Will you also tell something about the design biennial? In 2018, I curated the Design Biennial in Istanbul, a school of schools, 99 years after Bauhaus. Yeah, design, architecture, education mainly stays the same. And maybe here and there, the tools are changing. How can design education function differently? And you have to see this, maybe this, biennial as a prototype of a new kind of school, not a prototype as such in the building, but maybe the one that is reflecting and on possible forms of education itself. And if I'm talking about the notion of design, most of the time I'm talking about the expanded notion of design. I'm not only interested in the solutions. I really believe that these other strategies that I showed you that are political, critical, speculative, and also social and relational can infuse the traditional and very hard profession of architecture and design, and can redesign in itself, and redesigning by design. I really believe that that is where we can go to. It was a biennial that was situated over the city, in spreading over 6 venues that were very near to each other, so that in one day you could do all the 6 venues and see the whole exhibition. And the streets functioned as a kind of corridors of the school, and in these corridors you already could learn, and it connected different schools which were cultural places. The city has in Istanbul has a lot of underused cultural infrastructure, and by working with the cultural institutes there together, in a country where education is questioned and is challenged every day, we try to create a local alternative for schooling and pedagogical situations. So it's a kind of expanded biennial that went out not only in these 6 places that were connected by streets, but was also an ongoing program where many people could work and use the space of the biennial as a place of thinking, producing, making, reflecting about what design, architecture, and education could be. It was literally a discussion platform for many people. And their design was used as a tool for learning, and learning as design. Again, you see the same tool coming back. This is the system of Lucas Weekwert. I show that because having these kind of Lego Meccano systems along the projects I develop, it also becomes very easy to work on several projects at the same time, but create also enormous interesting platform for many people to work with. Every participant literally could design together with Asli Zizek, a scenographer, architect who is based in Belgium, her or his own exhibition tool, and could adapt the spaces to which the needs of that specific project in itself. And places of learning, traditional, hierarchical, non-hierarchical, as Wunderkabinets, as Cabinet de Curiosité. It all gave us the flexibility till the last moment, till the installation, to adapt and to, over the run of the biennial, to change and to exchange with the participants. I'm going to show you 2 examples that might be interesting for architects. And this is a project of Farzin Loftin-Jam and Mark Wasuta, the no-stop classroom, and where spaces are designed, and you should look more about it, where spaces are designed for, let's say, for learning and exchanging information in a one-directional and one-dimensional way. This is one of the spaces was the NASA control ground control room, or another space that they analyzed was another typology, was the police interrogation space. Which was, and they made like a research of 10 different spaces and reconfigured them in this installation, where this see-through mirror was showing another constellation with people in the space in itself. And yeah, you should look more in about it, or we can talk about it later. But these were kind of, here, this is the ground control. No, this is the police control center of Rio. Another project that I want to show you is a project of So Architects, a very interesting studio in Istanbul, where they did with their students research on the earthquakes in Istanbul. Istanbul is in a very problematic situation of earthquakes. In 1999, there was a huge earthquake, and they calculate every moment again a big earthquake, but nobody is really talking about that. And the city of Istanbul grew enormously the last 10 years. And all public space is occupied, and the streets are not safe to hide. And when there are like earthquakes, so the only places that were there are the parks and where people can gather. In this city of, and you have to imagine 18 million people, where could people go to? And they thought maybe the only way where people can go to is the water. And also because the fact that has this shape of the Bosporus that is going into, there is no risk for tsunami. And they started to speculate with their students, with mechanical engineers, with scientists, with sociologists, to create scenarios how it would be the days after the earthquake. How could they build a city on water, and how could hundreds of thousands of people and families start living there? And they built it for the Istanbul Design Biennial, a prototype one by one, in order to start discussing something that is a taboo in a country where that other forces play. How can we create hope on water? And I can say you, and everybody in the project will be very open about that, this is not the solution. They know it's not the solution, but it is very important to start talking and discussing how this prototype that can multiply it and can be brought to Istanbul and can be stored in a certain way can at least start a discussion again about this huge problem that the government is not taking care of and is ignoring in itself. So again, you see here it functions not as a solution, but as a conversation piece, but also unfolding scenarios, and was there to bring together all kind of specialists, people that are in geology, social scientists, mechanical engineers, and architects as the spiders in the web, and with a biennial as a kind of catalyzer of this process. So this is a bit what I wanted to share with you. I lost completely the time, but I believe that prototyping and making prototypes can help us understand situations, can help us to understand what are the interests of the others, and how they can change contexts and so on, and give us insights. So thank you very much, and I hope it was clear for you all.
At least to me, it was super clear and super nice overview. You're perfect in the time, so that's sharp. You must have an internal clock, but super nice overview of all your work. Impossible, of course, to do because it's such a range and such a wealth of content that you just gave us. But indeed, a lot of more to dig into. There is some questions are already prepared by one of our students, and that is Argyra. So I'm going to ask her now if she can put her questions yourself, to herself.
Hello.
Hello. First of all, thank you for the lecture. It was amazing being part of it. And well, it was a lot of questions that I wanted to ask, but since you showed so many prototypes, would you say that we can include people more through architecture or through art design?
Oh, but I most of the time also say I'm not interested in art design or architecture. And that's a bit provocative, of course. I'm fully interested in it. I'm not interested in it. I'm interested in what it does, what it evokes, and if the intention is to raise questions, maybe it's an art project. If it is if the scale is a table, it's probably a design object. If it's talking about buildings, it's probably architecture. So I'm not interested in the distinction between the disciplines. I'm interested in how and what role they can play in society. And then, of course, I see that making models, tools to debate is super helpful. The moment you start materializing, you suddenly get all kind of reactions. And I didn't dig deeper on that, but even the materiality, it's not only about the shape, it's also about the materiality of the model that is evoking emotions. It was through this ceramic tile that Francesca brought in from the beginning, and that you could touch and feel, that we could relate to a building, because this small tile is the placeholder of the whole building. It is the building. With that, you can understand the building, but we can also relate to it. It also had the size of her face. It is literally that. And so it's a design object, but it's architecture. It doesn't matter. But it relates to a human body, and emotionally. You could feel what the weight was, you could feel so you could make people enthusiastic about it. Or they could also say, I don't like it. Fair enough, but you have a discussion. And this is what it's important. They are there to discuss it, to understand it, to create and to show also the complexity.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Well, my other question would be like, because we talk like, I know I read something that you said we should unlearn some things. What do you feel it's time for architects or artists to start to unlearn from the way that we have been working till now?
That in general, that is very difficult to answer. Yes, we have to unlearn. I can say that we are trying. We see. Look, I will the example, and then maybe later on in another course, Lawrence can elaborate on that. Is that we see that I'm gonna also focus on architecture, because I assume that the most of the public is that the traditional system of building is a very mechanical way of dealing with, you make a plan, the plan is approved, and you go to certain execution phases, and it's like a machine. It's giving the one is to the other. And I don't believe that this is a sustainable way of dealing how that we are trying to build certain environments. Sustainable in the way that it's not therefore in the materiality only, but also in adaptation. I really believe that adaptive architecture or places that have a certain quality that are not completely programmed but have a quality, like if you would look to the building in our take set 33 back again, that you should visit and then see how the spaces are. They are really, really outspoken spaces. They're very high, they're very wide, they are very this, very that. They have a certain, they are not all the same. So you have to adapt to that. Also as a user, it's not only making things easy to adapt, it is also create a certain friction to live with the building. So it's also start to make sure that this fluid environment that is created around us by the, let's say, the digital tools is in fact on longer term inefficient. And that is something we have to learn, to unlearn that what goes very easy and fast and so on. So we need some friction to be more human. That is what I believe. And architecture can play a huge role in that. It's not by making everything easy that things will go also easier on the long run. Maybe for a fast win, a quick win, yes, but not on the long run.
Thank you.
And on building, there are many things that can be unlearned and to make the processes smarter. But we have to get out of our logics.
Yeah, thank you.
Jan, the project, sorry, I forgot the name of the designers or the researchers or the artists, the one that was studying the police rooms and could you elaborate on that? What was exactly the intent of the installation?
Yeah, maybe it was not directly a prototype, but it shows that for me, this project or that they presented was one of my favorite projects of the biennial. That's also maybe why I wanted to show it and share it. And it, on top of that, dealt with architecture, where architecture really can create one-dimensional views, one-directional views, and you can really guide the gaze, and you can really design spaces. In a classroom design is in fact very hierarchical, or an auditorium and so on. Is that what we want? Is this the pedagogical model that we want? You can ask that yourself. Also here we are in a certain constellation where there is a certain hierarchy, who is visible and who is not visible, and so on. What is important, what I want to say with that is that architects are therefore also should be aware about the scenarios that will unroll in these spaces. They are not neutral. So you can already, by the renders, already see that that the police or the is controlling not only a city, which is for the good, of course, but we also know governments in Brazil, how they act, or in Turkey, how governments there act. I don't have to make pictures with that. So the interrogation room, the design of that is also done by architects. That was a kind of comment. It's something I cannot resist to share. That yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, I find it interesting because, in a sense, maybe it is the opposite of the prototype. Because yeah, in the prototype, it does the opposite thing. It invites you to look from a lot of different perspectives simultaneously. When you share a prototype and it's in the middle of the table and there are 4 people, you already have 4 perspectives. And I think that's in the sense that I find it interesting as a kind of anti-example of how of the prototype.
The prototype, more than the plan, gives us the opportunity to make it into the building or the build or into a hyper object where all the different parties, all the different shareholders can really take part and give their perspective. And I find that an interesting thing. I'm really interested in that thing that is on the table. I try always when I go to a meeting even. I don't know how it ends, but it's just to give you how I function. Maybe that's also because I'm a designer traditionally from education. I try always to put a metaphor, an image in the middle of the table. Because if we don't do that in the beginning of a conversation, everybody is talking about something. It's like we talk about a curve and you have a curve in your head. But the fact that I did this, you know what the curve is. And we understand that the curve has a certain, it could also be a very, like this one, more ellipse shape. And then the conversation starts. So the prototype is the accelerated version of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I found that a really interesting way of characterizing a prototype, indeed, as an accelerator. I find that a very beautiful, beautiful image. Maybe, Laurens, you have other observations or the things to share in the meantime, if there's questions from the audience?
Because I think this is really interesting conversations, because prototyping, and definitely what you said before, as a tool for debate, because for me, also prototype, what it entails is the fact that it allows failure. The best prototype, in a certain way, is the one that fails the best, the one that you can kind of learn the most from. And the idea of the prototype, if we could transpose that to everything, like buildings as prototypes for society, it allows us mentally to kind of try to open up borders and to see a house or building construction not as a kind of end of an architectural's work, but actually the beginning of architecture. The end of a building is the start of a new kind of view. So understanding buildings as prototypes as well is something that and that's it's maybe a question. It's not really maybe a question to you, Jan, but the kind of start of a new discussion is asking you kind of what is the best prototype or the best failure you have seen in your past years from which you learned.
Wow. Maybe one. We used, so you have to know that this whole Z33 thing was a process of 10 years. And there were 2 competitions, and Francesca was in the 2 competitions. But she was in the first competition together with Office and Torso were together. And we had to deal with somebody else where the city wanted to have another program on that piece of land also. And so we did the competition like the Vlaamse bouwmeester would do, like Flemish. We did that, and indeed Office and Torso won the competition, but it was a complete failure. It was a complete failure because they had proven that the program that the city and the province wanted to combine on that piece of land was completely impossible. That it was like criminal even to do that. They had to do they had to build a tower I don't know of how many levels high to get that whole thing done, this whole thing, where others already have given it up and so on. They really speculated it to the end and say, we will do you everything. We will completely do what you ask. And to show the absurdity in itself. And that was, that was a complete failure. But in fact, they won, but they lost. But they knew it. It was a very good strategy. But for us as commissioner, was the best thing that could happen. So I'm still grateful to them that they did that. They showed, guys, you cannot use architecture for everything, and it cannot solve all the things. But we will show you, if you really want that, you get it. And it was done in this, office also, and Francesca a bit self-confident, showing it, and then with that also showing the absurdity. So it's this attitude that at that moment really functioned very well. That was a failure, and was also for me one of the most successful ones at the same time. The other ones done by head, no.
Maybe a question related. It's let's hope it won't be a failure. But the project you're working on now, Luma, actually you're working on that together. Could you see this building that you are building now for Luma, that the building could become also a prototype for your program in Luma? Is this the metaphor that you put on the table that will become your program later on?
It is certainly, and we are, yesterday we had, or was it the day before, we had that discussion where the building functions as a permanent, impermanent exhibition space in itself, and really goes from the detail where the handrail of the stairs and the balcony is can continuously change and can be readapted, and that's by the people in the atelier that are developing things, and so it's a platform. And that means that the building itself will be continuously evolving, and it's not it will have certain structure. Of course, you need a roof and you need some walls, but within that, you can maneuver. I give that very small example because that was the one that was in the discussion. The question was, do we need that? Yes, we need, anyway, you need a handrail. And then if you have a handrail, you better think about how it can have certain features. So we use that as a research platform. So the building itself becomes the research platform, not only in the materiality, but also in the use and the abuse of the building, probably. And that is something I think the architecture allow. One of the biggest interventions is, in fact, to leave the biggest space completely, it's quite radical, empty. Not doing anything because we don't know. So you can do always everything. So it's a renovation, and 1/3, a bit more as 1/3. It's I don't dare to say the square meters. The architect is around the table. Is I think it's 700 or 800 square meters. Yeah. Is non-defined. It doesn't have a floor. There are no windows in it. There is a roof on it, because we don't properly can say what we want to do there. And we don't have a, so it is also daring, and this is maybe also part of the unlearning. It's not because we can do it, we have to do it. So we better wait till we really know what kind of floor needs to be in. But in the meantime, we have a fantastic space under a roof where we can play, we can do football, or we can start watching maybe the World Championship, or maybe we make an exhibition and we have a place where an artist can work, and maybe we do a concert. It's all possible. So it's not programmed, not defined, but it is all these things at the same time. And therefore, I think this is this not doing anything becomes really a lot. So suddenly, it's the biggest thing of the building. Yeah, that's the best part, in fact, of it. Strangely enough. It was not like that when we started. It also came out of necessity and discussions. And of course, budgets play, and of course, but then also really questioning, what do we need? Why is it necessary? Yeah.
Maybe that's also when you were having the discussion or direction on the idea of the unlearning. One characteristic of things to unlearn would be maybe to leave room for the prototype, and to leave that space for prototyping and for that kind of development to happen. And then indeed, instead of having it all fixed in the planning, is that when there is a prototype and it fits the requirement of it accelerates things, then maybe it seems counterintuitive, but it could be very efficient and effective. Method.
I really believe in what Cedric Price or Stuart Brand? I think Stuart Brand, every building is a prediction and every prediction is wrong. And that when you, it would be probably, when I think about it now, that in every building, keep certain amount of space undefined, unprogrammed, would be a very sustainable way of dealing with space, strangely enough, because you can anticipate on changes. You can anticipate on, it's a bit what Elemental did in Chile with their housing project, not knowing how the people would live it, how they would appropriate it, and so on. But the kitchen and the bathroom, yeah, you have to give that. You need certain hygienic standards and so on. We are not going to discuss that. But do you want 5 bedrooms, or you want 2, or you want 1 open space, or you want to have a balcony? You can do it. It's yours. So this leaving things undefined makes it into a very and that is where a prototype can also be counterproductive. I mean, like, because you have the thing that you want to show everything that is possible. But as and that's maybe interesting to also say that we leave that open. We are not going to define that. That is beautiful.
And it is indeed a different mindset also to allow for that openness and to be there. But there was a question in the Q&A from Flor, but maybe it's more a suggestion. Well, maybe in the meantime, maybe I can read the little sentence that he wrote. Is that so? It's neither a topic or it's neither a question. It's a topic for the next design biennale in general, not in specific country, city. But there is no question mark or no exclamation mark, so it's difficult to understand what is. But maybe it's a hidden code that you understand, Jan.
What I can answer on that is I most of the time say I hate biennials. Why? Because they are these temporary events, and the day after the opening you have a hangover. And they are so. What I want to say with that, they are parties. But what you need to find is a need to discuss about something. You need to find an urgency. And for me, talking about schools and education in Turkey was very important. To talk 99 years internationally with an international crowd about design education and architecture education was important for me. So if we cannot formulate a need, I find it very difficult to step into a project. So I always hesitate quite long before I accept these invitations. And then there is a question on the regulation system doesn't let the openness. Yes, it does. There is no problem with that. Maybe Lawrence can say more about the regulations in this case, but it's possible, huh?
Yeah, I think that is something that has been proven also by many other architects, that there is a gray zone. There are often gray zones, unclear zones within regulations, which you as architects can kind of play with. And I think that's also the role of or one of the roles, of course, of the architect, to find loopholes. Because these loopholes are there to kind of prove certain things, which are maybe today kind of, let's say, written down in stone, and that architects assume as kind of the logic itself, such as designing for a program. I think that's also something with the Luma project and Jan, that is also something what is designing without program. Just designing as for a blank space without anything really set, designing for a very big uncertainty. And I think these type of ways of designing have to allow new regulations, or have to be backed up with new regulations. I think otherwise experiments are not possible. So I think, yes, the regulation system does allow it, but you need to find the gray zone within that regulation. And I maybe wanted to ask you a final thing, Jan, is that what I found very interesting also what you said before, that you don't care what the object is, you care what it does, or what its relevance is. And when you showed the kind of project of the Algae platform, or let's say the Algae project, which started with a mere kind of walk in the Camargue and a kind of acknowledging the fact that there's the algae and doing something with it. And then you notice in the project this kind of first prototype, which is a prototype of an object, which brings you further to a prototype of a platform, which brings you further to a prototype of a system. So there's a kind of certain steps that are taken to kind of enlarge the result, or enlarge the inspiration, or how would I say, enlarge the connections.
Yeah.
So what do you think is the next step, actually? Because this is a kind of also a growth scenario. So what do you think is the next prototype within that project of the algae?
There are many things in the pipeline. In fact, for the whole Atelier Luma, what we are thinking of is not really to produce more materials and start to export materials. That is not what we are interested in. We are indeed developing on this model, on this way of working that could be applied in other regions in the world. What we are doing, in fact, in other regions in the world now. So that's the next step. And then building with these communities in Egypt and the Emirates, but also in the Champagne region in France and so on, that are the four where we are working now, building with them networks where you exchange the knowledge that you build. So on this level, you start to build a supranational network of people that are becoming specialists, working with that, and keep on exchanging. So you do it locally. You start with a cup. You activate a lot of energy. You start to change the local producer, the farmer, that becomes a local network. You bring in a biologist that explains it. You set up a lab. Then you bring in more experts. You have a platform. You start to publish the research. You have a review, an algae review, and then that gets so much international resonance that you start to present it in exhibitions, in biennials, and there you build an international network of researchers. So it's putting these layers now together, and that we do for many of the researches that we are building. Yeah. That's the next step, and hoping that this idea of because everywhere algae are, for instance, different. Everywhere algae are complete. There are more than 100,000 species of algae. We never we are just starting to identify the qualities. So everybody can learn from each other, and that is super rich. Yeah.
Super.
Super, thank you very much, Jan. I couldn't have wished for a better last talk in the craftsmanship engagement lecture series here. There will be other lectures for other engagements later on in the season, but at least this one making this beautiful roundup of all the different types of prototypes and their different roles and how they can accelerate and create a debate. And in a sense, I would like to wish or express my wishes to the students at the faculty and beyond to also consider their design studio in that sense as a prototype and starting a debate. So Jan, thank you very much. Laurens, thank you for introducing. Maybe you want to close, or Lilet, you want to say the final words?
I want to invite.
Jan wants to say the final words.
I want to say something, sorry. And I would like that you all go to the Architecture Biennial and visit the Lithuanian, it will be a good one, I think, the Lithuanian Space Agency, the Lithuanian Pavilion, and where a very interesting speculative prototype in a lab set will be will be presented, and you can be part of it all. So that's more I don't say. Look into it, and please welcome. So
thank you very much, Jan, for the invitation. It's this weekend is the opening.
No, next week.
It's next week.
Yeah.
So I suppose you'll be there to welcome us all at the pavilion.
Yeah. Yes.
Again, thank you so much, Jan, to have spoken here and shared your views. I think it was very inspiring, and definitely also at the end, very inspiring conversations. And I think this is also the way that talks should be, rather than only listening, that this becomes a dialogue. And I think what Thomas said was quite nice for you, the students, to understand your design studios as prototypes, and because they are. And they're just a start for something else, no finite thing. And I hope, and I think it was quite, I didn't know that since the Bauhaus, it's true, it's 99 years that our educational system follows the same logic, which is something that clearly has to be put a bit in question. Yes. I think society has changed and will have to change quite a lot. And education will have to follow, or should be the one pulling the strings rather more. So I thank you very much, Jan.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you a lot.